Okay, today we are picking up where we left off with assignment 1. We took all of our different references, we put them on top of our design sketch, and I'm using the horizontal sketch here to come up with our own vision of how these things can combine into a believable landscape. And now we want to work with these individual layers and adjust their color and their value, kind of their lighting and their different color temperatures and different effects. First with just broad adjustments. Now image adjustments, let me show you with the sky. It's good to work from the background forward. My sky is made up of lots of different pieces. And if I think that those pieces all kind of match each other, then all I need to do is merge them together. So what I can do, I've done this once before, but to merge you simply select on a layer, hold down Shift, and then select multiple layers. You can also hold down Command and do it, and then you can add and subtract layers. And then once you have all the layers you want to combine into one layer so that you can affect them all with one adjustment, the shortcut is Command E, but to see where that comes from, you go up to Layer and Merge Layers. This only is an option once you have the multiple layers selected. So Merge Layers. And I'll use that Command E shortcut a lot. So now that whole sky is just on one layer for me. It's the sky and the coastline, and it's all behind my buildings. And remember, this was made up of multiple bits of sky, kind of overlapped on each other, and even multiple coastlines. So let's isolate that for a little bit. I'm actually going to get rid of my other smart layers because I don't need those anymore. So I'm going to select multiple layers, then drag them down to the trash. Select multiple layers, make sure I don't want them. Nope, and drag them down to the trash. This is obviously only after you've cut out everything. Select multiple layers and drag them down to trash. The reason is because even if a layer is turned off, it still takes up a lot of memory. There's my sketch, but I don't even need that anymore. Let's drag that down to the trash. I am going to keep my frame. And now I just have basically my sky that's merged between 3 different layers. This background kind of rubble skyline of buildings. This kind of foreground rubble or midground rubble of buildings and stuff. Oh, I think I erased something I want to keep. I'm missing my thing. That's why we use the history. Because I have this tower thing. Nope. There it is, that I wanted in there as well. Okay, so now I'm going to erase those other layers. You can also just select the layer and hit the delete button. And that can be a little bit faster. Okay, so now I only have the layers I'm using. They're all turned on. Now let me isolate just one of them so you can see it clearly. So here's the sky layer. It's the only layer that's on besides my white background. And if I go up to Image Adjustments, I can play with the lightness and darkness of the image with those top few options. And my favorite is to use levels. Now this optimizes. So if I want there to be a darkest dark, I can bring this black slider to the edge of what's called the histogram. This is measuring the lights and darks of all the pixels in that layer. And I can see now that I'm going from darkest dark somewhere in these shadows to lightest light somewhere in the clouds. Now if I push beyond those pixels, I start to lose information. So you want to be careful not to do that. If I push beyond the white information, you see how it just gets to pure white, and then I lose visual information. And if I push beyond the black information, it goes to solid black and burns out a lot of areas of the image. And because it's the background, I'm not too interested in getting it dark. But I might want to lighten or darken the midtones, which is a little bit safer. So if I wanted it to feel like a brighter day, I might shift the midtones to the left and it brightens everything while still having a full value range. Or if I want it to be, darker, like lower angles of light, more in the evening, I can go the other way. Or I can leave it at 1.00 right in the middle. Now what I usually do is I'll make a duplicate of my layer before I make these adjustments. And then I'll turn on all my other layers, and then I'll play with it. So I go to Image Adjustments, Levels. It's my favorite value adjuster. And then I can try deepening it a little bit. Try making it a little bit later in the day. And that kind of fits with a lot of these low light, the lighting on a lot of these images. So I think that helps a little bit. And now the reason I do it as a duplicate layer is I can always toggle it back and forth and see, okay, what does that help? What does that hurt? It helps the overall lighting, but it hurts this kind of stand out on its own. Now the other type of image adjustment is what's called a direct tool adjustment. And a tool adjustment uses one of these things on the side. And instead of affecting the whole layer, I'm just going to use it like an eraser or like the lasso tool in just one part. So I'm going to darken my values using what's called the burn tool, which is down here. I'm going to set my exposure to being something lower than 30. I'll usually do lower than 20. A nice soft brush, fairly large, and affecting the midtone range. Now what this does is it will deepen the midtones, because I selected midtones, wherever I click. So this is from two different source images, even though they match pretty well, but I need to darken these. So I just use my burn tool, and I can deepen those values just in the midtones. Even in the sky. Make those clouds look just a little bit deeper, so it matches a little bit better. Now if I do it too much, it starts just going towards black and gray. And so that's why I do a very low exposure. The higher your exposure number, the faster it burns and darkens. So I keep it really subtle because it's a very powerful tool. Now on the other hand, I can go the other way and use the dodge tool, which is directly within the same drawer. Dodge tool works the same way, but it brightens. So I'm going to brighten in the midtones at 15%, and then I can extend that kind of brighter horizon line over here, and even a little bit over here. So I like to work on both sides of things so that they match more evenly. All right. So the great thing about being able to do these kind of adjustments as a duplicate layer, where I can just toggle it on and off, is that I can also just use opacity and blend it in and decide how much I want. Because whenever I do adjustments, I tend to overdo it. And it's nice to be able to take it down. So now it's only at 68% as opposed to 100%. If I turn on my little viewing mask, I see what I really need to worry about. Okay, so now the next step. So I've got this one here, and it's in kind of warm light, which I like, versus the kind of cooler, bluer light of the background. So I have a few options. I could try to make this match that by making it bluer, and I'm going to do that by duplicating, and then going to Image Adjustments. And I can play with the levels, and maybe I'll optimize them just a little bit so we see a little bit more of the highlights. I don't want to make the shadows any darker, they're dark enough. And I might deepen the midtones just a tiny bit to balance that brightness. And again, it's on a duplicate, so you can see this is what it was, this is what it is now. Shows up a lot better. It's like this light is kind of breaking across it in a more even way. But now the other option is getting in beyond these first four adjustments, which are all just lights and darks, to the color adjustments. And my favorite one here for subtle work is color balance. And this is where you're just shifting the temperature. How you can have warm light and cool light. This is all lit with very warm light. So in the midtones, which is where I always start, it's always safest, I can shift those yellows to be a little bit cooler. Shift those reds to be a little bit more on the cool spectrum. Even shift it a little bit more magenta or green. And just a little bit makes a big difference. Now for highlights, I tend to like to have warm highlights. It gives more space. So I'll shift my highlights just a little bit to the warm sides. And I'll shift my shadows towards the cool. And you can do it the other way, but it's nice to have a difference in color temperature between your highlights and your shadows. It brings more depth to the image. So we are comparing now, this was the original, all warm light, all very kind of middle range values, with this, much more rounded out. Stands out much better. And then again, of course, I have it as a duplicate so I can blend it in. If I thought I overdid it a little bit, I can take it down, maybe to about 74%. Okay, next, this one. Now this one doesn't feel like it has quite the depth of shadow. So I think I can make a lot of improvements here with both the level adjustment, deepening the shadows. There we go. Maybe upping the highlights just a bit, so it feels like it's lit slightly differently. And then especially in its color, using color balance. I'm letting the highlights be quite warm, because this is getting closer to the viewer now. Letting those shadows be a little bit deeper and cooler. Really helps that stand out better. Still not thrilled with this edge. I might have to find a way to obscure that a little bit. Okay. And then blend it back, just so I'm not stuck with all of my original changes and decisions to about 70%. Now this guy, the values are very strong. So I make a duplicate of it. I guess I can go a little bit brighter according to this histogram. I certainly can't go any darker. I might even want to open up those midtones a little bit, brighten those up. Okay, and then color-wise, it's pretty dramatically warm in its highlights. So in this case, I might even cool its highlights down a little bit. Just a bit. And play with its midtones. See what kind of fits the rest. And the shadows, I think the shadows are pretty good where they are. I don't want to warm it up. It's all about making them match. Okay, so big difference there. You can see how it helps match the values of the rubble. And I'll just blend it in a little bit with what's behind it. Okay, so now I've made all those colors match. I just got this foreground thing. And I want this to stand out more as a foreground element, not so much red. And I can do that through image adjustments. Last time. And that's going to be it for this demo. Just doing those overall adjustments, and then a little dot